All right, we are recording. Good afternoon. This is Jen Bonet with Creative Coast, Executive Director of the Creative Coast, coming to you live from our beautiful offices at 2 East Bryan Street, Suite 100A today, where we are slowly getting back to normal, hopefully. Space is looking great. Excited to be here. But the board met on this yesterday and has decided that we will continue to do the webinars through at least the end of the second quarter, and then we'll take a decision there to see whether or not we feel it's safe to do in-person events again. So we are sticking with the webinars through June, and I'm working on the June calendar right now. So if you have ideas or topics that you want us to address, please reach out to me at Jen@the Creative Coast. Today's topic is on podcasting, kind of podcasting 101 from our local guru, Raz. Raz has been a longtime friend of the Creative Coast, even member at times, but friend, helps us with our Entrepreneurs Night recording, live streaming, and some of the work that we do. And so I had asked him to give an overview of podcasting and getting started with podcasting for the Creative Coast audience. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Raz.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, as always. Happy to be a part of it. I think I know a lot of people here, but I've been in podcasts for about 7 years. Started with my own podcast in real estate, and then just fell in love with it. Kind of my backstory is that, so I also used to do a radio show in Savannah called Savannah Business Showcase. And at the end of every show, I would ask people, and Mark's been on it, I would ask people if you had a superpower or ability, what would you choose and why? And the answer that I would give to that question is immortality and to live forever. And that's because I never met my grandfathers on either side of my family. I never got to learn about what they did. I never learned their mannerisms. I never heard their voice or know what they smell like. So I always, and I think that's why I fell in love with podcasting, because you can kind of become immortal in a way. My kids and grandkids and great grandkids, as long as there's an internet, they'll hear all of these recordings and all of these talks that I give, and they'll see my growth and see, what I love to do and why I love to do it. So that's kind of the beauty of podcasting, and kind of what led me in and keeps me, in love with podcasting. So today I will be giving a short talk kind of on, and my son's in the background, so you might hear him join us. But yeah, so I'll be giving a quick talk on podcasting, and not necessarily one-on-one, not the basic stuff about how the technical stuff, but kind of the things that nobody tells you about podcasting that can help you become successful starting your own. More of a professional podcast versus a something you just do with friends on a weekend. So let me try and share my screen one more time. All right. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So, so podcasting, I guess it's more of a 201. And so when you launch a professional podcast, it is, kind of consists of something I came up with called the 3 C's. And you want to have all of these in place if you want to have a podcast that's successful, that kind of has an impact on the world, that reaches the people you want to reach, that educates or entertains the people you want to educate and entertain. And that's compensation. Number one, at the very top, you got to start with compensation. You got to figure out a way to make money from your podcast, some type of income, or bring more income to your current business. Consistency, you have to figure out a way to stay consistent. Even though it's a ton of work involved with podcasting, a consistent, even if it's once a month or twice a month or once a year, and it's a huge podcast, you have to do it every year at the same time, or every month or every week or every day. And competency, a lot of people want to start a podcast talking about topics that, swimming, even though I don't know how to swim, or I do, but even though I'm not great at it, or, they want to start a podcast that has nothing to do with anything they know, just because they think it'll be a cool podcast. Start with something you know about, something that you have a passion for, something that you can educate people on. So consistency, compensation, and competency all make up a pro podcaster. And here's an example. This guy is John Lee Dumas. He's the kind of the reason that I started podcasting. If you look in the top right corner, this is from last month. This is his income from his podcast alone from just 1 month, $267,000, right? Which is crazy, just to say, to say the least. Of course, he's in the top 1%, of people who make money from their podcast. But this is just an example of how, you can make that much money. So I went back through his records. Oh, and then before I get to his records, the 267,000. So John Lee Dumas runs a podcast called EO Fire, Entrepreneur on Fire. He does a 20-minute interview every single day of the week. And he asks the same questions every day. He records, I think it might be different now, but he used to record 8 episodes every Monday or 9 episodes every Monday. And then that way he slowly built a buffer so that a year later he could take, several weeks off and have the podcast still going. So he had the biggest point I want to make here is that he had a plan for his podcast. He launched with 40 episodes already in the queue. He spent 6 months educating himself and getting coached by some of the top podcasters at the time. He, knew exactly what he wanted to do. He had the episodes. He had a logo. He had money in the bank and was able to put his entire attention on the one podcast, the one thing he was focused on. And he, so he had a plan. It was great. And that's what you have to have if you want to be successful with your podcast. You have to have some type of plan. It's just like having a business plan, because it's just like running a business. You have to make sure you have a list of income sources, which we'll talk about in a second. You got to know how you're going to make money from your podcast before you even start. You want to know who your target audience is. You want to find sponsors and create a list of sponsors who could support your podcast. And, put a list together of like, how will your podcast benefit the sponsors? How will you put them in front of the right clients? Where will you put links to their website? Do you have a 30-second ad? What does the ad sound like? Will you create a video for them? So just benefits for a sponsor. A marketing plan. Where are you going to publish your podcast? How are you going to share it on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and all this stuff? So it's like, how are you going to do all this stuff? And potential guests, just have a list of potential guests also as well. So who you're going to be reaching out to going forward. So this is something I'm working on. So you might see, I showed some of the people on the call earlier, my new logo. So my new logo and brand is going to be green, but it might jump back to blue in a second. So don't be shocked if you're a designer out there. So John Lee Dumas's pro podcast, the example I'm using today, his biggest month that I could find on his website was February of 2016. And he had an income of, gross income of $595,000, almost $596,000 in 1 month. So he had a book launch that brought in quite a bit of money. I can't find it on here right now. And then he had, $220,000 worth of expenses, approximately equaling $353,000 profit for February 2016, which, again, incredible. Top 1%. But that said, there are a lot of ways you can create a, incredible flow of income, cash flow for your podcast, even if you don't make this much money. I just use this as an example to let you know what the possibilities are. But, number one is that you can make money podcasting in a lot of different ways. And I work with several clients who use, a bunch of these ways. Number one, you can sell, if you're an author, you can sell books or ebooks through Amazon, or just through your website. You can sell products like t-shirts and hats and mugs and all types of little swag items on your site. You can add affiliate links to your podcast and to your show notes and to your blog. If you don't know most of you probably know what an affiliate link is, but it's where you add a link to, say, Amazon, for example, but there's a lot of different sites. add a link to Amazon, and that link will take listeners to Amazon, and you'll get a percentage of whatever sales they buy within a certain amount of time. You can sell private memberships to Facebook groups or to mastermind groups through your podcast. You can sell e-courses. You can host paid live events that bring in a little bit of money and let you meet people in person. You can offer coaching, or you can do crowdfunding such as patreon.com or stuff like that. But the one I recommend most people start with is sponsorships. If you have a business now and you're doing a podcast associated with a business, the first place you want to start is like vendors that you are already using. So if you have a bike shop, and you have a local repair guy, maybe the local repair guy wants to sponsor your podcast, or vice versa. If you're the repair guy, maybe the local bike shop or wants to sponsor your podcast, or a website that you recommend everybody go to. Maybe they would love to sponsor your podcast because they'll be getting in front of, people who need bike repairs, who need new bikes, and who need helmets and lights and different types of shoes and clothing and gear for biking. And that applies to everybody out there. One of my biggest clients is a law podcast, and they had a plan. We recorded 10 episodes within 6 months before we launched, which was actually really hard because it's hard to get attorneys and lawyers to, get their schedules together. But they launched with 10 episodes in the queue. So we had time once we got started. And then they also had a time to find a sponsor, which was just one of their vendors. And it's a vendor they use every trial they have to, create and handle all the tech stuff. So the vendors pays them, I don't know, but they have 3 sponsors now, and they make a few $1,000s a month just from the podcast, which is really awesome because it pays for their entire team, and it also introduces them to other amazing attorneys all around the nation. The name of the podcast is called The Great Trials Podcast, and it's hosted by Harris, Lowry, and Manton right off Broad Street. Really great people, really great podcast. So a lot of you, maybe you think about starting a podcast, but you don't know if you have enough time. Another way to get the benefits and some return on investment from podcasting is just to be a sponsor yourself. Maybe you have, maybe a company is interested. I wish we were in person because I could ask, more about what people do. But maybe your company is, a restaurant, and you want to find a cooking show, or a baking show, or a, cooking, I don't know, but, find a podcast that you can sponsor.
Anyone want to volunteer?
Yes, that'd be cool.
To talk about your business, so Raz could talk about how he might go after sponsors. Mark, Jeremy, come top of mind to me. You both are in startup phase and marketing.
Will, Groover, remind me what you do, Will. I know you've done it for a while. I think it's janitorial.
Hey, what's going on, Raz?
Going good, man.
Sorry, I've got bad light today. I'm not a janitor. I work for a commercial cleaning company, JanPro.
That's right. So. Sorry. Yes.
But,
yeah. So a commercial cleaning company could, you could sponsor a, honestly, since it's commercial, any business would need a commercial cleaning company. So you could sponsor a podcast that's focused on business or marketing or management. Might be a better route to take. Or you could start your own podcast on the commercial real estate, and then just have all the links go back to your website, and all of the sponsorship could just be you, and say if you need commercial services, commercial cleaning services, then we're your people, or something like that. We'll take more brainstorming to figure out like what your goals are for the company, but I mean, there's just so many options out there for, potential for return on investment of a podcast. All right. So another thing that you should probably know about podcasting is that it takes work. It takes a lot of work, actually. It's a business, and you need a team to manage it. So you need somebody to handle marketing. You need somebody to handle the finance side. You need somebody to handle sales. Somebody to help with, monitoring chats and comment sections on different websites and YouTube and stuff like that. So you need a moderation team. So you need all of these different parts, and you have to be the on-screen talent as well. So it's very possible to do all of this stuff yourself, but it gets overwhelming really quick. And that's why most podcasts fail around episode 7. Around episode 7, most podcasts fail. So if you make it past 7, then you're already in the top 10% of podcasts, because most people just don't have a plan. They don't have a team. So everything doesn't have to be you. It could be your co-host to help. It could be a virtual assistant that you hire. It could be an employee at your company to help with different parts of it. Or what most people don't think about, it could be artificial intelligence or AI or a computer program that can help you with your podcast as well. For instance, there's a website called Temi, TEMI.com. I believe it's .com. But what they do is they provide, sorry, I got distracted. They provide transcription services for your podcast. I think it's 25 cents a minute. So if you do a 30-minute podcast, that would be about, $6, $7, somewhere around there. Just to, transcribe the podcast for you and create a blog post or create captions so that you can share it on LinkedIn and people don't get in trouble being on LinkedIn at work. So stuff like that. You don't have to sit there and type out the entire podcast in order to make a blog post. You can have an AI do it for you. So yeah, so it takes work. It takes a lot of work. So that's why a plan is so important. And it's very important to assign roles and who's going to handle what up front, so you don't get overwhelmed, and so the podcast doesn't become something that has potential but doesn't realize that potential. Another part that most people don't understand about podcasting is that people will listen. Long form content is back. Yeah, long form content is back. So for the past 5 or 10 years, ever since social media has been in the forefront, people have said, keep things short, 30 seconds or less, 5 minutes or less. Nobody has an attention span anymore, but that's not true, because podcasting, I'll personally listen to a 2-hour podcast if it's really great content, if there's a really great story, or if I'm learning something that, applies to, my business, then I'll listen to 2 hours easily. So it's back. So don't be afraid to record an hour-long episode. Don't be afraid to record a 2-hour interview if it's an incredible story. But then you want to take that hour-long episode and then you break it up into 5-minute segments that you can put on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube even, or Snapchat or Twitter. That's where you want to keep the attention span, because on social media, people are always scrolling. It's I call it like a casino effect, or the slot machine effect, where people are always putting one more quarter in, trying to get that hit of dopamine where like you win something. So it's like on Facebook, you're always scrolling one more story, trying to find something that makes you happy, or find something that you can share, or find something that even makes you sad or makes you emotional in some way. And that's what Facebook spends millions of dollars every year to get people addicted to their to these social media platforms. But like I said, as far as a podcast goes, it's different. It could be long form. It could be a long, in-depth conversation with the person. Mostly because people have it on their cell phone. They can listen for 20 minutes on their way to work. They can pause it, listen for 20 minutes on their break, pause it, listen for 20 minutes while they're going for a walk, or washing dishes, or working out, or commuting home, or commuting to the next job site. So that's the easiest way most people do it, is they listen to a 2-hour podcast along the entire day, just like an audiobook. So don't be afraid of long form content if you have a great conversation or content. Another thing too, I said competency earlier, as far as like one of the 3 C's that make up a professional podcast. And a big part of that is finding a niche topic, finding something that only you know about. I spoke with the group the other day, and one of the ladies did leather work, like working with leather fabric specifically. Like, that's such a great topic because now you can talk about, reupholstering leather. You can talk about turning a old leather jacket into a purse, or you can talk about how to clean and care for leather. You can dive really, really deep on the topic. My buddy Tyler, who's on the call, he always says it's like the T. Correct me if I'm wrong, I always mess it up. But it's like you want to be, an inch thick on a lot of subjects and like a mile deep on one subject. And when you do a podcast, you want to find that one thing that you can go a mile deep on. So, and that's going to keep people coming to you. That's going to allow you to post things on Pinterest that are, always there. They keep people coming back to the podcast. Just finding topics that people will search for that will get them to find you. If you just say, if you write a post or a podcast on how to, how to market in 2020, there's so many more websites out there that are going to rank higher than you. There's so many sources out there that people are going to trust more than you. But if you say how to market in Savannah for St. Patrick's Day in 2020 or something like that, like the more specific you can get on the topic, the more likely it is that people will find you. And staying consistent goes along with having a team. People will listen if it's consistent and they know that you're there. People will share you more if they know that you're always coming out with new content. They'll have more confidence in sharing your podcast if they know you're going to be there and they know they can trust it. You're going to be there at the same time every week and always do content and always good content. So just be consistent. Another thing is that you'll grow. Most people don't think about this, but it's going to improve your speaking skills. If I didn't do podcasts all the time, I would be extremely scared right now. Even though we're not in person, I'd be like fidgeting and shaking, speaking in front of people. But because I know about podcasting and it's what I eat, live, and breathe, I think that's the right idiom. But it's because I got a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in it. This is. It feels good. It's easy for me to talk about it. So it's improved my speaking skills as well. Continued education. I'm always researching more stuff on podcasting. And whatever your topic is, you're always going to become the expert. And I'll talk about that in a second, but you're going to become the expert on the topic because you're always researching. You're always interviewing interesting people surrounding your topic. You're always looking at new articles and new ways to present information. So it's just gonna create an expert's air about you, which is going to become, make you become an influencer. You're gonna become the go-to guy in your industry. For example, my buddy Terrass Misher, he runs the Service Business Mastery podcast, and in the service industry, whether it's plumbing or electric work or commercial air, like he's the guy. When he goes to different conferences, people know him now because of his podcast, because it's so popular. So you become an expert. And I have enlightenment here. It's kind of like, it's a little cheesy, to say. It sounds a little cheesy, but it's true. Like sometimes you will interview a person and you guys will just hit it off immediately. And, it usually happens around a 30 or 40 minute mark once you guys have gotten past all the pleasantries and you can dive really deep on the subject. You never know. Like sometimes you'll meet, your next best friend. Sometimes you'll meet a person who you'll connect with, who will change your life, who will, say something that changes your outlook on life just through podcasts. And sometimes that by itself is worth doing the show. But it's kind of cheesy. It's not really practical, but I promise it happens.
I have a question on that a little bit because you said you hit it off 35 minutes in, but then John Lee Dumas, his podcasts were 20 minutes long, right?
Yes.
So, what's your recommended length?
Yeah, so that's a great question.
Terrass that is doing 2 hour long podcasts, and then you got John Lee Dumas that's doing 20 minutes. And
So the politically correct answer is to do whatever you can do consistently. But, the average commute is 20 to 25 minutes or so, the average commute to work. for most people. So, somewhere around there is a good
Not
starting
anymore.
point. Yeah, it's true. That's true. So I guess now.
But my daily walk is longer than that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like whatever you can. So I said the 30 to 40 minute mark because when I was doing my radio show, I did it for 45 minutes to an hour. And it was usually around 30 or 40 minutes that things really kicked off. Like it's something around that point. Even when I'm editing shows and I'm trying to find a golden nugget I can take out, share with people and share with the host. It's usually around that 40-minute mark. It's something there. It's like a golden nugget area where like things just kind of open up. Even if you're having a meeting, with somebody, just like pay attention to that next time. If you're sitting down with coffee for someone and you just haven't met them before, or you're catching up, something around that time. It's just when things open up. So maybe an hour-long show.
I'll check that out. I'll keep notes in my next meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe around an hour is what I usually aim for. Just because of that, it takes a little while for people to open up. It takes a little while to dive deep. So that's why I usually aim for an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, especially with interviews. Again, so you'll make great connections. So John Lee Dumas, he didn't have the 20-minute mark, but his show was so popular and he met so many cool people that he made all these great connections. And that's like the number one secret behind podcasters don't talk a lot about is like on the back end of stuff, behind the scenes, is that you have a 20-minute conversation on air, but behind the scenes, you get a chance to, you get their emails, you get their phone numbers, you get a chance to follow up with them. And now you guys are, friends or, becoming friends. You're building this relationship and it's with people who, you're going to reach out to people who you admire, people who you can learn something from anyway. But now you have something to offer them with your show and marketing platform. So now you guys on a level playing field. So it's just that behind the scenes, for example, Jesse Cole of the Bananas, I worked with him for a few months, relaunching his podcast a year ago or 2 years ago. And behind the scenes, he made so many great connections. Like his podcast didn't really take off and become the wild success that we hoped it would. Maybe it is now. I don't know his numbers. But behind the scenes, he made so many great connections. People like Donald Miller and Gary Vee and all these famous authors. I can't think of all their names right now, but it was incredible. And then they would invite him places. They would ask him to join the mastermind groups. He would get speaking engagements from that stuff. He would get, people would, write recommendations and stuff for the book launch he made. And I haven't seen it. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I know that that's taking his business to the next level just because of the behind the scenes relationship building. So that's something to keep in mind. Like whenever you have invite new guests on the show, find a way to follow up with them, even if it's just a handwritten note card saying thank you for coming on the show, or if it's if you mention some type of resource in the podcast like a book they should read, why not send them the book? Just build that relationship and get people talking about you behind the scenes and building your brand that way as well. It's really powerful. And then next is last is that you'll become the expert, and you'll gain like authority by association. If I'm doing a music podcast and I have the Beatles on, or if I have John Bon Jovi on there, Jay-Z, then now I'm becoming an authority. And people want to get close to me because I'm close to those guys, if that makes sense. And it's the same with any industry. It's the same with any industry, whether it's finance or real estate. My first podcast was in real estate. And when I told people who I had on the show and they recognized some of the names, they were like, wow, you must be doing pretty well. Even though I only did 7 episodes, I had that 7-episode burnout on my first podcast as well. But yeah, it's all about the connections. And then you become a thought leader as well. And thought leaders and influencers, they make more money. There's no difference between what I do or what my buddy Tyler does and Gary Vee, if you guys know him, or Tim Ferriss. Like they might be a little smarter, but more than any, not really much, but more than anything, they're just, they're influential. And it's because they've associated themselves with all these other influential people. And that's just kind of what it comes down to. Everybody's just a normal person, but it's just like, who do you know? Who's in your circle? You know, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So, yeah. So I guess that's it. You know, I would love to answer questions.
I definitely have a few questions, but I'm going to let Ashley go first. She had posted in the chat that she had a question.
Perfect.
Hi, yeah, this is really good information. So I only had one question, but now I have 3.
Okay, good.
So podcasts for me, so I'm in the financial world. I work for a credit union. I do business development for the credit union here in Savannah. And I was actually in a marketing and business development meeting the end of last year. And my manager actually started talking about podcasts. And I said, what are you talking about? Obviously I know what it is, but I had no idea what it was for her, and were people really listening to podcasts these days, you know? She had to show me where to find it on my phone. So it just really piqued my interest. So my first question is, now I know it's on my Apple device, but do Android users have the same app on their phone? Like, how easy is it for our clientele and people in our community to have access to podcasts?
Yes. So they have, I think Stitcher is big on Android devices. Another one I use is called Pocket Cast. So there's something called like an app, podcast catcher. And it basically is like, it's just an app that will pick up any podcast, put on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher or Spotify.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And how would you go about setting up a podcast? Like, say if I wanted to start up I guess you call it channel, you know, for the credit union, but help people financially and do this podcast for our community, how would you go about setting it up?
So that's something I help with, me and my team, if you're interested in getting help. But there are a ton of resources online, and I can share them with you. If you want to add me on LinkedIn or something like that, I'll be more than happy to send you over. So like the guy I showed you earlier, his name is John, eofire.com. He has a great free podcast course. There's another one by a guy named Pat Flynn on his podcast. It's called Smart Passive Income. And they both have incredible podcasting 101 type of things, where it takes you step by step, the equipment you get, how to do it, you know, and how to succeed at it, all that stuff, step by step. If I wanted to, I couldn't create anything better. so that's where I usually recommend people go to. But again, I do it for people as well if you need help with it.
Okay, yeah, I'll connect with you on LinkedIn.
Right.
And my last question is, do you see who is listening to your channel? Because I like what you said a minute ago about creating the relationships. Like, so by doing that, can you actually see who's listening and how many people are listening?
Yes. So that you have statistics on geography, and if I can, I'll show you one in a second. But they give you stats. They show you, you know, what day, how many listen per day, and it's charts, and you know what days are your most popular days, the age range of the people listening. Some go in depth, some go really in depth. But yes, depending on the host. So what you do is you record a show as an MP3 or a WAV file, if that makes sense, as an audio file.
Yeah.
And then you upload it to a host, the podcast host, which you have to pay for. It's just like having a blog for your podcast. So you upload it to a host, and then the host will tell you how many downloads that particular audio file gets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great information. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for being here.
So, Raz, I had a couple of questions more about like your process and specific. I mean, you mentioned team a couple of times. So could you kind of walk through the roles of your team? Yeah.
So so it's me. I do a lot of the upfront stuff as far as helping people launch and helping people brainstorm what their podcast is going to look like, you know, so helping them get set up. So I'm kind of the lead guy. I have an audio guy in Atlanta who helps me with the school together. He's been in music and audio editing for years. ever since college, so at least 15 years, 10, 15 years now. And, you know, he does all the audio editing for me, and I upload it to Trello. If you're familiar with Trello at all, I upload all that to Trello along with the graphics, and, you know, it basically becomes an archive for a podcast, which is really cool. So that's our process. So I get people launched, and then and then Tyler, he's got to run, but he does all the video, any video work we have. Tyler Edict down there. But anyway, so I get people launched, then I help you. I record it for you. If you want to record it via Zoom, or if you have a studio yourself, or you want to come to my studio, you can just send me the audio file, and then I'll get it edited and get it published, and we will check it. You let me know if everything sounds good, and then we'll launch it. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell.
So, but you might need a graphic designer to help with your logo. You might need a social media marketing person to help get word out when it's launched, or when each episode goes out, so that all your social media channels get updated.
Correct.
And the other big key skill is the editor, the audio editor.
Correct. Yep. And I have you know, companies I cooperate with that do that as well. So I can recommend you to some great people who specialize in graphic design or specialize in you know, social media publishing. But it's just not. I just create the content.
Right. And then my other question is, how important is the edit? Right? So, you know, in this new pandemic world, we're basically recording these Zooms and posting them to YouTube, and people seem to be enjoying them without me spending a lot of time editing it and you know, making sure it's perfect. Is that true with podcasting as well? Or do they need a little bit more polish?
I think they need a little more polish, even the Zooms, because I record several podcasts through Zoom actually, and we'll just hit record and I'll get the audio file. But then you want to take it and make sure the audio is leveled. You want to make sure that, you know, nobody's talking extremely louder than another person, because it'll blow people's ears out and they'll stop listening to your podcast. You want to, but actually Zoom does a pretty good job. You want to, if somebody, you know, if you're recording via Zoom and somebody sounds terrible and somebody sounds great, you want to do your best to improve the terrible guest's sound as much as possible. So, I mean, so audio is very important, I think. Way more important than what video is, because I'll watch a video and, you know, with 2 pixels, but it's hard to listen to bad audio for very long, you know. So
yeah, I was wondering, because I feel like we didn't do a lot of video classes prior to the crisis, because I was caught up on the idea that they really should be edited and they should be done professionally, and, you know, everything had to be perfect. Well, when you're in the middle of a pandemic, you have to figure out what to do. I was like, oh, let's just do it, right? Let's just Zoom. We'll get together, right? Let's not worry about if there's an entrance or an exit or whatnot. Like, let's just put them out there to the world and see what happens. And we've gotten pretty good response. I'm just wondering.
And also, I think
there's probably a transition back to a little bit more polished for video as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's important as well. I don't think you should let anything hold you back from starting one. I mean, you have a plan together, you know what you want. So then it's just like incremental improvement over time. You know, keep doing the Zoom as long as it's working. But, you know, just, you know, maybe next time, you know, invest in a better mic, or invest in a better, you know, USB camera, or, you know, invest in an editor to make it look, to put an intro and outro on it, or invest in a videographer to go and get a 30-second clip of a sponsor that you can play in the middle of the show, you know, to sponsor the show, something like that. So yeah, just, you know, incremental growth over time is really cool, because I think the listeners also appreciate that. I love finding a new podcast and then going back to their first episode and seeing how far they've grown, or seeing, you know, how far they've come.
Yeah, interesting. Mark has a couple of questions.
Hey, Mark. Mark, you might be
Mark,
muted.
you're muted.
Yes, Terrass, you've interviewed me before with your portable equipment. What recommendations do you have for the equipment, hardware, software to acquire to have your capability?
Okay, so a couple things. I'll send you the list as well of the Smart Passive Income EO Fire courses. But I would look into an Audio Technica ATR 2100. So it's an Audio Technica USB mic, and they plug right into your computer, and they sound amazing. And they have a little headphone jack in the back. But they also, a cool thing is that it's USB, but they also have the ability to upgrade to an XLR mic, which is what I'm using. Yeah. And then with the XLR, you'll be able to record 2 people in one place with a mixer. Yeah. But I would start with the USB mic, Audio Technica USB mic, or a Blue Yeti USB mic. They're also really good. And those will, be everything you need, honestly. As far as software editing, I use Audition, which is a paid service through Adobe. But Audacity is a free editor, which is what a lot of people start with, and it also works really good as well. You use it too?
Excellent. What suggestions do you have for determining an appropriate location to record the podcast? You've got a studio. Let's say is wanting to record. Obviously, you don't want to have a lot of noises or distractions. What environment do you want to have to produce a high quality podcast?
That was a great segue, Mark. I appreciate that, man. You could come to my studio in Savannah, Georgia, and record, and I'll do everything for you. It'll sound great. Or, but also you could just, so you want to be in a room with, so like I have the wood back here. It's kind of a rough thing. I also have sound padding on the walls, but you don't want to be in a super open room. You want carpet and blinds and stuff on the wall so that the audio quality doesn't just keep bouncing from wall to wall, sounding like a pretty bad echo. So one easy way to do that is to put something like in front of you or in front of your computer. So the audio from your mic goes directly into that and it stops right there. So that's one thing. Even if you're just starting from the very basic, just put, a blanket or some sound foam or some type of audio board just directly in front of you. And a lot of times for what you're doing, that'll be great. That'll be enough. If you want to level up, then you could, fill out the whole room with moving blankets and get carpet on the ground or put up audio pads and, soundproofing material. So if you want to improve, there's always room and more money you can spend, but that's probably the best thing to do.
So we do still intend to make that small conference room a podcast room, but given the current situation and my inability to promise that all the devices would be sanitized in between each use, we're not doing that until this troublesome time has passed.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, well, let me know. I'll be happy to help with that. Free labor.
Follow-on question to that, Raz, is we're in a virtual environment right now through, it's not Zoom that we're using some other facility. However, suggestions you have for interviewing people remotely?
Yeah, I think Zoom is great. Honestly, that's I used to use Skype and something called I think it was like Linda or Ecamm call recorder or Linda, or there was another like lady name or something like that. But it used to be Skype, but it was terrible. It just never worked, and it was all these other buttons you have to push. But Zoom is great. If you have the option to use Zoom and get the lowest pro account where you can record with multiple people and record for an hour or more, then that, and even if you record to the cloud, even if you drop out or somebody drops out, it'll just pick right back up. It'll keep recording. Or the cool thing about Zoom Pro is that you can also record in separate tracks. So everybody on here would have a separate track in a recording. So I could take, Ashley's audio out and make it sound even better than she already sounded. But you know what I mean? And then put it all back together later. So it's an amazing way to record a podcast.
You've described the editing software you use. Suggestions on where to archive your podcasts? Dropbox, Google Drive, any suggestions?
So whatever host you choose will be the archive in a way. Is that what you mean? Like where to put the podcast so iTunes can read it?
Correct.
Yeah. So find a host. So podcast hosting is, it can be as little as $9 a month or, $75 a month, depending on how much you're putting out. So it's just like, I don't know. My favorite one is Podbean, Podbean, like coffee bean. So Podbean is the one I recommend people start with. It's very easy to use. It is simple to set up, and they've been around for a long time. Another staple, and it's the cheapest, the most, well, I'm not gonna say the cheapest, but because they're free services, but I think it's the best value because you can pay for a year for I think $108 or $113 or something like that, and it's unlimited uploads, so you can upload as many files as you want.
Excellent.
Yeah, and another one is Libsyn, which is like an industry staple. Libsyn.
Okay.
But I might have spelled that backwards, but you'll find it.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's an industry staple, and everybody kind of recommends that as well. So it's a great service too. But the problem is if you're doing a podcast every day, or if you're doing an hour-long podcast a few times a week, then it gets really expensive really fast because they go by how many files or how big the files are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And last question then, any suggestions you have for promoting your podcasts via social media?
Yes. So I use an app a lot. It's called Headliner. Headliner.app. And what it does is it creates a something called an audiogram. And you can, so basically you can go to Canva. If you're not familiar with Canva, check it out. It's really, I love that site too. But you can create a graphic for each podcast in Canva with your guest or with your topic, highlighted, and then take that graphic to Headliner. You can upload the audio clip from the podcast. So like a golden nugget that I said you can find around like 30 minutes or 40 minutes in your show. And then you can create like a little graphic with audio waves and subtitles, and you have the graphic in the background. It's just a cool way to get people, to see the podcast and take a second. Maybe they might not even listen to the whole thing, but now they're aware of your show. And if you can hook them in with a very good nugget, they might come back to your podcast and listen. Yeah, so I would check out Headliner.
Excellent.
I'm muting. Any other questions? Anyone?
Does anyone already have a podcast?
Creative Coast used to have a very active podcast. And I've considered for a long time rebooting it. And was kind of using Entrepreneur's Night to test video and audio. And now I have all this great content that we've just created for the last 2 months. So just trying to figure out how to use it moving forward best.
Yeah. You should definitely take the audio from the Entrepreneurs Nights and add it to the podcast platform, I think, without a doubt. Because the shows were 45 minutes to an hour long, and it's kind of hard to sit down and watch, but it's a lot easier to listen while you're doing something else, for an hour. So I think it'd be worth putting it on there.
Well, I guess there's a consistency to it too, because we are doing it once a month. So at least, there'll be at least one, it won't be a story a day, but it would be, once a month. And we have 11 in the bag.
Yeah. That's a whole year. It's a year's worth of content right there.
So, we might have to talk about that offline. Restart the front porch.
Yeah.
That was the name of the podcast, The Front Porch.
I remember. Yep.
Well, if no one has any other questions, then I guess I'll let everyone get back to their days. Good to see everybody. Hi, Wade. And thanks for joining. And we will see you on this week. Thursday's lunchtime topic is actually a Tech SAV lunchtime topic. So you'll have to go to techsav.co to look it up. It is on launching a technical product with Mark Sutton, who's a SCORE mentor locally, who's launched a lot of digital products. He's kind of a SaaS marketing expert. So that's the topic on Thursday this week.
Cool.
And again, I'm starting to plan June. So if you have any ideas of new topics that you want us to address, just send me an email at jen@thecreativecoast.org, and I will go out and find an expert to teach the class sometime in June. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
See you.